Bling family. Today's really a special episode for me. We have a guest on today that I have looked up to and followed since before I planned my first wedding, when I was still deciding whether I even wanted to dip my toe in the wedding pool. She's just an amazing event planner. She's an amazing person. We are so excited today to have the experience and the knowledge of Ellen Fox, the owner and lead planner at ShaFox Weddings and Events, with us. We're going to talk today about some different cultural weddings, because Ellen that's her jam. She's really good at that, and I'm got my notebook out and I am ready to learn.
Ellen, thank you so much for coming on and being a guest.
Thank you.
Truth be told, we've asked Ellen for about a year to be a guest, and finally, she's in the studio. Mike, I don't know if we're going to get word in after this. So anything you want to say?
Thank you for being here. And I'm excited to hear about all the information that she's going to give us today, because this is something that I don't really do a lot of either. And I'm just anxious to learn. So I've got my notebook ready too.
I also think it's crazy interesting. I was doing some research last night preparing for Ellen to come, and just looking at some of the different cultures and wedding traditions that they celebrate. And I was reading for like a long time last night.
So before we take off with this, can Ellen introduce herself?
Oh, sure.
Ellen, tell our audience a little bit about you. I know you've been doing this for a long time, and a lot of people look up to you. So just share with our audience.
Gosh, Sharon, thank you.
You are very welcome.
That's very kind. I feel like that comes because of the hard work I've done over all the years, and it's nice to see other professionals appreciate the work that I've put in. Been doing this over 20 years now. This is the only thing I've ever done. So college, I went to school for this. I worked for corporate America and always worked on a commission basis, and I would end up being really good and make more money for my bosses, and they would constantly keep changing my commission structures. And after a while I decided, you know what, I'm going to just try to go do this on my own. And I did, and I said, well, if I fail, I can always go back in the industry. Well, again, that's been over 20 years. So far it's worked out well for me.
Kudos to you.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of people that listen or want to get in the wedding business or just work for themselves, and they don't always take that leap. So kudos.
And that's what's hard about being having your own business, is that you're not just an event planner. I'm also the business manager, the marketing, the accountant.
There she goes, talking about those hats again.
It's all the different hats that they wear. But the best part about the wedding planning is the families, and get to experience all the different fun things. So we're talking about cultural weddings. And I'm kind of a history buff. I love to write history shows. I love to see how things happened, why the world operates, different things like that. And cultural weddings is actually a really good example of that, because what they're doing in these events, regardless of what it is they're passing down traditions that happened tens of thousands of years ago. So you're talking from many of the cultural weddings I do, you talk about, they have, it's always food, okay? So food is always a big part of it. The dancing, and these traditions that they've done over time. And all they want is, when you meet with them, they want to share those traditions with you. They want you to learn about their culture, and they're all completely different. So then for you, for me, it's like a learning lesson. I get to sit back and they teach me what their traditions are. I am not an expert in Indian weddings or Muslim weddings, or I'm not, but I've done several of those events before because I've listened to my clients and I've let them teach me. And then that's made me, for better or worse, what you all think is an expert in planning. But it's really special. And it's not just the families that want you to get to learn the culture, it's all the guests that attend too. So they'll come up to you throughout the whole time and they'll say, well, what did you think about this? And how did you think about that? And this is how we do our culture. So it's really just kind of a learning lesson. And after you do it so many times, you start to realize, just like regular weddings that we plan, they all have the same elements. Every single wedding, and even though they're all different, they all have the same elements. And then you learn what those different ones are when you're trying to execute an event.
I love the inclusivity you just described, where they're happy to share with you their culture and you're happy to learn. I love that. I think that's the way it should be.
Well, I like how you said too that you don't know every little step of it and you learn with them. Because just like I was telling you earlier, yes, I'm getting into these different weddings and I don't feel like I'm educated enough to talk their language in a way. But just like what you were saying, you really don't know, but you have learned from them over the years.
And I think that's being upfront and honest with them. So
Yeah.
if you have a client that's going to approach you for the first time, don't be afraid to say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm willing to learn. So teach me and share with me your culture, and their eyes, their
They
body
respect
language, they respect that. They want you to embrace,
Right.
and they want you to get immersed in their culture and truly learn it and understand it. I mean, so much so as they want you to dress like them. They want you to participate in things with them. They start to bring you on board almost as if you're family. And that's really how they treat each other. as
That's so
family.
special too.
It's just different. It's just
Yeah.
a whole different element. I've got lots of new little things that I've done and I've learned. We went through it and I kind of made a list of when I was asked to come on of all the different weddings, and I'll kind of go down the list. I've done North Indian, South Indian, Christian Indian, Pakistani, Muslim, Chinese, Korean, Jewish, Armenian, Turkish, Syrian, Lebanese, Nigerian, African, Iranian, Greek Orthodox, and Polish.
I
Those are the ones
have,
I could just
Wow.
remember.
I have a question about that. We're based out of Louisville, Kentucky, Southern Indiana area. Have those events been in the Louisville, Kentucky area?
Every single one of them are here.
And I think that's the thing I said to you when you first came in is I've learned how many cultural events, different cultural weddings and events happen right here in our community that I don't necessarily know that people realize.
There's tons of them. And it's, they are all over. And then a lot of the people that grew up here that might move out of state, they all want to come back and get married back in state. So there's a lot of my clients who leave Louisville, they go pursue their professional degrees, but when it comes to getting married, they want to be back in their hometown, and it's because they want the community to all attend. So they're community events. It's not just the families, the immediate families. Most weddings people say, maybe it's between 100 and 200 people. These are not. These are grand events where the whole entire community is actually invited.
So about how many people are we talking? I mean, these events, I'm sure it's all over the place, but you said grand events, like upwards to how many guests?
So the largest I've ever had was 650. That was the largest. Most of them are running about between 300 and 500 tends to be the average. So they're big events. A lot of them is because they have a lot of family. In some cases, some of it is that they invite their entire community that they go to church with or temple with or synagogue or whatever, and all those people are actually invited. So that's why the numbers on those events are a lot.
And one thing with your events too, it's not just one single event such as the wedding. You're having day before events, day of, day after. Isn't it almost like a weekend type thing, or maybe a 4-day event?
It is. They're always 3 days, no doubt about it. So when I book these events, first of all, I make sure I'm the lead, but then I have a large team behind me because I can't do it. So at these events, I need to be visible the whole time. So I really can't be leaving the space or whatever because everyone comes up to me. The aunts, the uncles, the cousins, I'm their go-to person. And then I send my staff off to run the mini errands that they request at the time. So
you need to be there as part of the event basically to funnel
I
that
am
out.
visible the
Okay.
entire time. So then I've got staff that does. So, not that I am not one that does setup and stuff like that, I do, but at those events, I am very visible in the space, so they have easy access for me to whatever it is that I need.
You definitely have to increase the amount of people on your team.
You have to have way more people.
Way
I
more.
have at least 3 to 4 on every single one. Just takes that many.
And just from a planner standpoint, when I hear you talking about these guest counts, I'm assuming you're very limited in what venues you can do.
So that's another thing. So we are limited in our space. So there is only so much space that we can do, and we have to be able to have events where we can do multiple days. So a lot of these events are all determined based on capacity and what we can do and what we can't do. So some of the places will repeat, locations. But then sometimes, they're starting to, the further you get away from your home country or whatever, certain traditions start to fade away. And so I find it even from like about 10 years ago till now that they're starting to drop some of the traditions they always did because it's easier to accommodate. It might be accommodate the budget, might be to accommodate the venue that they might want. So they start to slowly but surely for lack of a better term, Americanize their weddings just out of necessity. So we just have to we're flexible with that based on what their need is. And a lot of the time when I'm planning these weddings, it's not necessarily with the couple, it's with the mothers. So that's a different perspective. Like sometimes I won't even get to meet the couple.
Wow.
Yeah, so some of this, it might be one time they come in and we get some things done, and a lot of the time is I'm working with the mothers throughout this process, which that in itself is wonderful because then they're the caregiver. They're the one that, their reputation, they're the one that you have to make sure looks really good during the event. And so they're really good about championing me, being like, oh, Ellen, you're going to do, this, teaching me different things. And I know you'll be great at they encourage me as much as I am there to support them.
I love that.
So it's a different experience, which is.
Well, I have noticed that. I did one in January, not January, it was December with you. And I've got another one coming up in June, and I've never met the bride or the groom. I mean, it's mom and dad.
It is mom and dad.
And they're so easy to talk to. But it's different than American because I'm used to sitting there talking to the bride and the bride telling what she wants. It's not like that at all.
It's not.
Now, I don't know if that's like all the weddings that you do, but I mean, I just feel like they're planning this event for her, almost like a gift. And I think that's special.
So a question about that, does the couple at all know any of the plans, or is it a surprise, or do they just find out during the event, or are they let in on anything? I know they may not be at the meetings, but I was just curious about that.
So they know, because they talk to the parents and we'll have conversations and stuff, so they know. And a lot of times in the planning process, I'll find out, what are your expectations? What do you want? So tell me some things that are important to you that you guys want to see from the day. And I'll kind of make notes and stuff about what that is. But they do know what's going on, but it's just a little bit different. Like, they just trust their mothers, they trust their aunts, they trust the decision makers. They don't have to be in control. They like that somebody takes that off their plate.
And that's been passed down from generations.
From generations it's passed down. So it's where the parents are very much involved. And what they want is to throw an amazing event for their children.
And what I can imagine too is that maybe those couples are less stressed because they're not having to make every decision and do everything on their own, and they have the support of their parents, so they can really enjoy wedding planning.
Well, and some of the things that I tell my clients all the time is we only get to do this once, so let's do it right and let's have fun when we do it. There's no need to stress out about it. And maybe that's a little bit of where it is too, is that the parents look at it more as I don't know if it's necessarily coming of age, but it's just how it's done.
Right.
And it really is with almost all of these cultures that I mentioned, that it's all, some are more, like I have a Korean wedding coming up and the bride has been very involved in the planning. What's kind of fun with that is we've got dancers coming in. So these cultural weddings is all around food and it's all around a dance. And so now this one has Chinese dancers, 16 Chinese dancers coming in. It's going to do some big performance and parade into the room. So it's like those things are like completely different than you would see at other events. We talked about the Indian weddings where they have the multiple days events, where they have, depending on what part of the country, you're either going to have a sangeet, which is kind of like the rehearsal dinner for American, or the mendi, which is we do with the Muslim culture. Then you have the wedding day, and sometimes the ceremony is in the morning, the reception is at night. There's all sorts of different, they're never the same. And then they always have an event, or sometimes even there's an event on Thursday night, and then there's a brunch on Sunday. So it can be a 4-day event,
Do those events have those large guest counts as well?
every single one.
Holy moly.
So they're in for the whole duration.
Right. They know they've got family coming in town. That's why a lot of times we'll send out invitations way in advance for those, so that some of the family member overseas can get their visas to come in.
That's what I was gonna ask. How long is the planning process for those types of events?
Oh, those are always, I would say we're always about a year out for those events. Sometimes they're shorter, sometimes it just depends. A lot of these clients are in residency and they're getting matched on where they're gonna be placed to work. So some of this is around like when they're gonna be taking their boards, or other people are taking, they're all working professionals. And so a lot of this is determined based on.
We kind of talked on this on another episode, but so when you're dealing with an event like this that has 4 days, how far out in advance do they send out invitations?
So we try to send out, some of those actually we send about 3 or 4 months ahead of time.
Due to the travel.
Due to the travel. So those are sent out to the ones that are coming from overseas. Then the ones locally, we're at about 2 months. Not too much different than American weddings, but now recently I've been having us send out even our regular weddings in advance. Normally it was that 6 to 8 time period, and we're going about 10 to 12 weeks.
I do 10.
Yeah, so people have time to prepare for travel is what it
Right.
is.
Well, and mail is,
Oh, it's, yes.
The delay with, I was gonna say
Delay
that,
with the mail.
absolutely.
Right.
That's interesting about when you have so many people coming in from out of town and coordinating that of people
Well,
with
not
visas.
just for out of
That's-
town, just overseas.
Oh, that's what I meant, out
Yeah.
overseas with visas and everything, they've gotta be notified, of course.
I actually got to be a wedding guest at an Indian wedding. My background's in healthcare, and one of the doctors that I used to work with invited me to her wedding. And the dresses that she wore, I mean, she changed it. I went to 2 of the events that she had. And I mean, the jewelry, and it was just amazing. Can you share a little bit about that? Like what the bride traditionally wears in maybe an Indian wedding?
Yeah, so each of them are slightly different, but it is, they're very elaborate gowns. Most of them are made overseas. There are a couple places here locally. Some of my brides have gotten some stuff out of Chicago and New York, but for the most part, their gowns come from overseas. The thing is when I am doing scheduling for those weddings, they actually have an aunt, or they hire somebody that helps dress the wedding party. So they have
I
someone.
wish that was a tradition in every
Don't
wedding.
you? So they will actually have where they've got hair and makeup just for certain family members, and they have hair and makeup for other family members, and then somebody is actually on site there to dress everyone, because it takes a very long time to dress. And every culture, so the jewelry that they wear, it has meaning and has purpose. So some you've seen where they wear the nose rings, and some you've seen they have the bracelets and they have the bangles, and each of them, there's a meaning behind that for each of the different cultures. But yeah, just getting ready for the day is hours upon. So normally you schedule 45 minutes to an hour for someone to get hair and makeup. That's not the case for these. It takes a lot more time just to get the veils on their heads and pinned on, and so all of that takes.
What culture is it that they do the design on the hands?
So yeah, so that is, it's the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Muslims. So it's all, yeah. So each of them do different. Yeah.
And does that mean something? Is there a certain design for something that means something? I mean, I think that's fascinating what they do.
It does, and I don't know.
And
yes, I do. That's one of those, I know how to plan
Is
it.
that done on wedding day or?
No, so that's done in advance, because it does need time to set,
Okay.
and then they have to clean their hands and stuff. So that is actually done in advance. Once they do it, it lasts a long time. But I think,
Now, see, you just taught me something. I did not know it lasts for a while.
yeah, they
I
actually
felt like
have
it
to
was done
sit
that.
there. So this isn't usually only the ladies are together, and she sits there hours upon hours upon hours as it's done, especially if there's ones that are done on the hands and the feet. That is typically where it's done. So it takes a long time to do that.
Well, the doctor that I was just talking about that I was so blessed to get to be a part of her wedding. She got married, went on her honeymoon, and came back. And I remember scrubbing next to her. She was a surgeon, and we were at the scrub sink and it was still on her hands. And I'm like, man, is that stuff ever going to go away?
Yeah.
And she goes, it will.
It takes a long
Wow, I
time.
didn't know that.
That's interesting.
When you were talking about their jewelry and everything, is that something, and if you don't know this, it's fine, but I was just popped in my head, is that passed down like from?
It is. So a lot of the pieces are all passed down.
Okay,
And
I
so when
wondered.
you see the jewels, that's another part that's pretty fascinating. When you see the jewels, those are real jewels. They are not costume pieces. So they're real diamonds, real emeralds, real rubies.
Wow.
It's beautiful to see that it's the real stuff, real gold.
And to think that maybe her great grandma and grandma wore that, and maybe her daughter's going to wear it someday. I love that.
Correct. Those are
Yeah.
all pieces. Yeah, they'll bring them out of their special jewelry boxes, and it's all wrapped up real nice. And yeah, those pieces are pretty spectacular.
So that in itself is kind of a moment for
It
them.
is. It is.
You know,
So when it comes to the gowns that they wear, I mean, I know they're usually bright colors, yellow, red, green, whatever. Does those colors mean something, or is it something just like they pick out a gown and it's happened to be that color?
Most of them just pick it out based on what they want. So they'll have a different outfit for the Sangeet or for the Mehndi than they will for the wedding day. So it just depends. So it's several different gowns that they wear. Some are more formal, some are less. It just depends. So there's really no. Yeah, I've seen them wear many different.
Yeah.
one of my biggest takeaways that I guess I had never really thought of it. I've never been blessed to attend one of these weddings. Is the traditions, just things passed down from generations. I mean, that is something I didn't even. I guess I wouldn't really realize or know about since I've never been involved in those.
Correct. Well, if you're a guest attending one of these weddings, it's amazing because it's nothing you've ever seen before.
I was just like, whoa.
Yeah,
whoa,
it's so fun and it's so exciting and it's so different. I mean, here's a great example of something that I didn't know. So about a year ago, I did a Nigerian wedding. It's Christian. So we're at church, and then they kept talking about this part of the offertory, and I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever, you give your money. No, it was not that. They play this amazing music, and everyone parades up with their money, and they dance, and they're clapping, and they're giving this money to the church, and it's this big, huge production. Like, it was amazing. So it's like, at our church, we just pass around the basket and put your money in it, and this was like a showcase.
We have an app.
But that was such a big part of their culture. Another thing I've kind of learned over the years too, you know how we have the dollar dance, whatever. I mean, we don't really do that much anymore. But that is actually a tradition. That is a Polish tradition. Did not know that until I got planning a Polish wedding. That's actually a tradition to do the dollar dance with the couples. Back to this Nigerian wedding, they call it spring, where you get to come up, you dance with the bride, and you shower her with money. So they're literally, it's like, how we go make it rain and you take the bills, and that's literally what they're doing. And they're like,
oh my goodness,
pouring money, and it's just dropping down on the floor, and and I'm going, oh my gosh, like,
what is happening
here? So it's just stuff like that, like things that we just think but there's meaning behind.
I remember the wedding I was talking about again with the doctor. She's still my friend. I'm going to have to tell her to listen to this episode. I'm talking about her wedding so much, but I have never felt more embraced by a family. They knew that I didn't know any of the stuff going on, and I was just a guest. I worked with her, but I felt so loved by that family. They kept going, did you eat? Did you, you get drink? I loved it. I didn't want to leave. It was just the most amazing feeling of love in that room.
They're very inclusive.
I was going to say, you said that, Sharon, at the beginning, of feeling that and that's a lot of people to feel included. When you say those kind of numbers, that just goes to show about those relationships and this family and culture. Like, I'm fascinated by this.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say, so I'm always visible in the room. So when they come up, and then, so I've done this for a while, so they'll always say, well, this wedding or that wedding and stuff, and they'll always mention the food. Ellen, have you eaten? Have you eaten? I'm like, no, I'll have time later to eat.
Right.
Like, please make sure you eat. Please make sure you eat. Like, it's all about the food. They want, even though I'm hired that day to work, they still are like, please have fun. Please.
Treated you like their family.
Right. So it is.
Actually, that's nice. That's really
What a
nice.
neat atmosphere.
It is completely, yeah.
So let me ask you this, Ellen. So I know you plan stuff, but I mean, and I know you're a designer. So when it comes to the design part of it, do you actually plan what the whole event's going to look like, or do they bring you ideas, or is that your job to come up with, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? Why don't we have draping here?
So it's a collaborative effort. So they have an idea of like what they want, and then a lot of my role is spatial. So how's it going to fit? How's it going to lay out best into the room? What's the easiest way for traffic patterns or to get to the buffets, or what's going to give the biggest impact? And it's always usually around a focal point, which is going to be a stage with some dramatic kind of backdrop where the bride and groom are at. It is an effort where we all kind of like work together, and each one is different. So on the Sangeet or the Mindy, that's usually one that's more colorful and vibrant. And then usually on the wedding day, a lot of my brides have been doing traditional, golds and blush and champagne and whites. So they do kind of have two different looks throughout the whole event.
I mean, I feel like you have what you do and the experience that you have, it just blows my mind. And I would love to work more with you too. I tell you,
Maybe
just to learn from you.
Maybe
would be
Mike,
great.
you and I need to take Ellen to lunch.
That's good.
Hey, what I hear, Ellen, is there's two people that the next time you need some help.
Apparently, right?
I would love
Well,
that.
and I know, just like Sharon, I'm sure you have your A team.
Well, I think every planner has
Yes, they do.
their go-to. But I do try to mix it up. So each client is different. So I may not use the same florist every time because I think the personality or the style of
Fits
somebody
best.
else
Sure.
fits better. So it's not necessarily that, but it is helpful when you have your core group
Yeah.
that it's easier to work with.
And I
It's a
respect
comfort.
that.
It's a comfort to me. To
It
have
is a comfort. And working these events is not like a normal event. It's
Well,
just
I was
not.
just thinking, that kind of leads into my next question, because like Mike said, we all have our teams that we're comfortable with, but it's not like you can call just anybody to do these kind of events. Like I'm thinking, I'll do it. I'm the chubby girl in the room. I like to eat. I do. I love a good meal. And the food, where do you, first of all, that capacity to do that many.
And that kind of food is what I was
And
just
I'm
thinking.
sure, stop laughing at me, Michael, but I'm sure there's, what do they want that traditional food for their culture? And it's
Sharon just has so many questions,
Where do you
Ellen. Are you
find
picking
it?
up on this?
I do.
So here's the deal, is that all of these are, if we're talking specifically about Indian and Pakistani weddings, we bring in caterers for that. So the caterers are the ones, so when they do a tasting, a lot of times they will go to wherever the caterer is. So there's some out of New Jersey, Chicago, New York.
So when you say you bring in a caterer, you mean probably not a local caterer.
It's not a local caterer,
Gotcha.
it's an outside
Okay. I
caterer.
didn't
So
know
they
that.
will actually go, because they're all so different. So some are strict, it's all vegetarian.
Mhm.
Some can introduce some meat. Some are, it's just like when you cook, some of them prefer more bland, others prefer real spicy. So it's like every event is completely different. And that's really where the caterer is the expert in that. I don't even attend those tastings. They go travel there, they figure that out. My role is to logistically work then with the caterer when they get on site
Getting
and the
them
needs
in
that the
and,
caterer needs, correct.
So the venue is usually a larger one, like we said earlier. So like if you have a hotel that holds 1,000 people,
Mhm.
is the hotel charging them like a surcharge or something so they can bring in another caterer and
They
not
always do.
using?
Correct. So it's usually the staff on site will run the food, clear the tables. They will work with the beverage stations. Sometimes they'll do the coffees. So the local staff does some of those. It's all so there is a fee per person, and that fee really ranges anywhere from $32 to $50 a person, just for the ability to be able to use the kitchen. Because then they do have to close down for other events.
Sure.
They can't have multiple, coming out of the kitchen. It's the same way as some of the Jewish weddings, if they have to do kosher,
Right.
you have to shut it down, rabbi has to come in and bless it. So that is where the hotel needs to be able to make up,
That's
some lost
interesting.
revenue.
And I would think relationships over the years really helps you facilitate those because you know what hotels and how it works and all of that.
Well, they always want a planner. So when we're working with these kind of weddings, the venues always prefer and encourage that you do have a planner because it's too many moving parts for just the hotel. Because then the hotel becomes the person that has to deal with the florist and with the transportation company, and
they don't want to
it's
take that
they
on.
can't do that. So
and elaborate, I'm sure rentals and
oh yeah,
all
it's-
different kinds of
It's
things.
insane the amount of work that goes into
And they
these.
couldn't do that and still run their hotels and do their day to day.
And then the families don't want to be the person having to do that the day of either. So
Sure.
the families want the planner to take that pressure off so that they know they've got somebody there to take care
And
of
they
that
can
for
be
them.
fully immersed in that actual days of celebration.
Correct.
Wow.
I've learned a lot.
I'll tell you
I'm
what,
just-
we could go on and on and on, but I'll tell you what, Ellen, the information you have shared with us is amazing.
I think that just what I've heard from some people, I really thought it was important to touch on cultural because, as I said in the beginning, I don't feel like people realize the level of events, weddings as well, that happen right here in our own community.
It's a really great, diverse community, and that's what's so great about Louisville. I mean, everybody's familiar with World Fest and the different things that we have that go on here. But it's the celebration of culture. But also planning this is one thing of the event, but it's the day, it's the execution that's a completely different element than
Right.
you can learn about it, you can do it, but how good are you going to be in a pressure situation and when things change on a dime, and you have to be flexible and you have to adapt and modify everything at the last second. So that's needed for the event. So you can plan a good event and it looks good on paper, but you have to be able to, at the last second, just take your timeline, crumble it up and throw it out because it'll change on a dime. And that's usually what sometimes will happen with these events.
Sharon, are you with us?
Sharon,
Breathe
breathe.
over there. It's okay.
I mean, that even happens sometimes at traditional weddings, but yeah,
You just got to be able to go with the
not with
flow.
600 people.
But it's just being respectful. It's always being respectful and honor the traditions of the families and take in what they're teaching you. I know this sounds so simple. I remember one time, this was just so powerful. I was in charge of the family's Quran. I'm Catholic. We don't have the Quran. And they entrusted me with this beautiful book. And they said, it cannot touch the ground. They explained the things. And it was in this beautiful case. And when we pack up things for events, we pack it up, stuff ends up on the floor, like we're rushing around, whatever. Like, I took such extra care of this, and I remember taking it home, and I had all my kids come in, and I'm like, look, guys, look, here's a Quran, like, look at this, look how pretty this is. And
they trusted you with it.
Right,
That's
and they
big.
trusted
Yeah.
with me, but then I remember just the whole time, I'm like, okay, this is my responsibility. This is an honor that they gave
Right.
me to, this book, and I'll never forget that. And when I finally let it go, I was like, oh, I was like,
Yeah.
bye, like I
I
just
took really good care of you.
Yeah.
It's such an honor.
It's an honor, and if you really embrace what they have and really take to heart and listen, it really kind of, it makes your job a whole.
I
lot
can imagine
more
how
fun.
that felt because I mean, every wedding, and I'm sure you feel the same way, just the fact that someone trusted me enough to take what is going to be the most special day probably in their life, or at least in the top 3, and put it in my hands,
Mhm.
like 100% put it in my hands. That's something that you just can't overlook. Like that, you can never take it lightly. You can never, there's no do-over. Like they're trusting you with so much money for one thing, this special day, and the relationship, they're trusting you that you're going to speak for them and represent them the way that, they would ask you to. So I totally get that. It's huge. And I think something that no wedding planner should ever forget.
No,
Or take for granted.
Yeah, well, it's an honor and it's a privilege, and it's gosh, I was almost going to get a little emotional there for a second. It really is it lets you know that sometimes as planners let's face it, it's kind of like we have a cool job or whatever, and
Right.
we get wined and dined and whatever, but on that day of, it's not even about you, it's about them, and it's like you want to work so hard. And that's really any client, it just feels different for some reason. It's like, it's just different, and it's an experience that you need to have. You need to witness it, because it's just so special, and the hugs and the kisses, and then you see them out in the community, and you see them at other weddings, and they're your everything. And it's just,
I love that.
I agree with you. I mean, you work hard to make this event happen. You do more than I do. But even in my job, I mean, you know, we work with them for a year, we're excited, they get married, and then it's over. It's like you close the book. It is emotional. It is emotional.
It is emotional. Sometimes you don't want, sometimes there's weddings that you can't wait to
Close the book.
right, say goodbye. And then there's other ones that you're like, oh.
Sometimes honestly, more often than not, I'm a little sad.
Yeah.
Because I work with mine, like I'm sure you do, a year, 18 months. And, you know, I know by the time they get married, I know their grandma's name, and I know their cousin, and I know who talks to who and who doesn't, and all the stuff. And then it's just like, okay, you know, congratulations, see ya. And I'm a clinger. I'm a bad clinger. So like, I'm still Facebook friends with almost all
She's
of
a
them.
level 5
Yeah, I'm
player.
a level 5 clinger. But you know, I still have brides that I'm friends with on Facebook. I'm starting now to be asked to plan some baby showers and stuff because they're just part of me.
You've said it before, it's like they become part of your family. It really is.
You would love these kind of weddings. Maybe when I have one, I'll have you come work.
Please call me, please.
Yeah. In the Muslim tradition, it really is the woman leaves her family and joins the groom's family. That is how it is. Like, they do leave. And it is super emotional. And there is a grand exit to where the bride walks out, followed by her family. And when she leaves, that's technically it. They're not responsible for her anymore. And I will never forget.
I would cry.
Oh, I'm literally on my timeline.
You have daughters, I'm sure.
No, God, take them. I have teenagers. But no, there was one where I'll never forget, like, she gets in the car and she drives off, and she had younger brothers. And the youngest, the baby brother, comes up and she's in the car. And he like put his hand on the car and just followed the car. And the mother had warned me, this is very emotional, like everyone will be crying. I was like, I'll have a box of Kleenex. And I'm thinking, whatever, like, you know, okay, whatever.
You'll cry, everybody.
And then we're going, and I'm the one who's Kleenex.
That would so be me. That would so be me.
But I'm the one using
Okay,
the
so I
Kleenex.
have a question about this. So when you say they kind of exit the family, like, you know, how we do Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff like that with our families, I'm sure she still has some kind of communication.
She does. So that's where the Americanized part comes in. So she does, and she still sees the family, but that really is, she is gone. So she's not living under their home anymore. They're not.
Still an emotional time, but I was just curious.
But it really is, the parents are not responsible anymore. And like, so family functions or whatever, she becomes part of his family more than her family.
Wow.
So it's, you know, it's beautiful. It's not something we
For parents and siblings, though, has to be
the
very
moms.
difficult.
Oh, that
As
just
we're
makes my belly
at the
hurt.
plans, as we're planning, the mothers will sit in the office or in a meeting, and they'll just start to cry. And oh, Ellen, it's so emotional. It's so emotional. And I'm like, I get it now. Like I experienced how emotional it was, and I wasn't even family.
It has to be emotional for the daughter too. You know, for the person too.
It's
They're
all
walking
very
through it,
emotional.
but I'm sure it's a lot
And
to
I
take
kind of
in.
sometimes, not that I kind of think they do this multi-long thing, so by the time that they leave,
They're
she's
ready.
just so darn tired, you know?
Yeah.
It's just
Okay,
so
see ya.
tired. Right,
Okay, it's over, bye.
So some of the tears might be from sheer exhaustion of partying for so many days in a row. But that really is the special
I love that
tradition.
the story you just shared, though, that her brothers felt so close to her and protective of her. And I mean, you can just imagine what his little heart was feeling when that car drove away.
Oh, yeah.
I can't.
That
That's
broke. It was just sweet. It's just things you don't experience all the
Ellen,
time.
you weren't invited on here to make
I
us cry.
Well, and you know what? That shows the difference between, and I don't mean this the way it's going to sound, but cultural weddings do the detail and the meaning behind love or children leaving the family so much different than Americans do.
From the clothing to the jewelry to the events. I mean, just what we've learned. I mean,
Well,
it's
and
there's meaning behind everything. It
just
seems
to
like.
be really honest, like a lot of what I've taken from Ellen saying today is how important the parents are.
Yeah.
And, you know, to be brutally honest, and apologies to any of my couples that are listening, but I deal a lot of the times with, I need mom to butt out. You know, Sharon, tell mom whose wedding it is, or, you know, like, I get in between moms and couples a lot, and I feel like sometimes I'm more of like a therapist and a mediator sometimes than, you know, that's as important as making the timeline kind of thing. And I love that there are weddings where it's not that way.
Yeah.
And
Hearing the other side
Yeah.
is just,
Mhm.
and maybe.
And really, that's the way it should be.
Maybe people listening to this episode, the opportunities to work with your parents, your mom, whoever that may be, to celebrate this next phase of your life. Maybe it doesn't have to be
Because
one way or the other,
it's really
you
a
know.
fine line, I think, that I walk a lot with making the moms feel included. And let's face it, they're usually who's paying for everything, the parents. So definitely they deserve a say, but also making the bride and groom feel like it's their day. So what I love about what Ellen's saying is it's almost like the parents are gifting this day to the bride and groom.
It's
And
so-
planning
That's actually a good point of which you brought up, that it's about the bride and groom and their day.
Right.
With these cultural weddings, that's not how it is.
Right.
It's not just about the bride and groom. It's about the whole community.
I love that.
The event as a whole, the marriage as a whole, the commitment, the celebration
Both
as a whole.
families and
I can honestly say I've never once thought at these weddings and planning that it's ever what the bride and groom wants. That's not what it ever was about.
it's bigger than them.
It's bigger than them. It's not just about them. It's about everyone.
I know, back to my friend again, I keep using that because it's the only Indian wedding I've ever been to. But just like you described, she was a chief resident at University Hospital, surgeon, and she didn't have time. She did not have time to plan this wedding. Her mom and his mom planned the whole thing. Like, I remember when she's like, Ken, you know, I want you to come. I'm going to send you an invitation. She goes, I don't know what we're going to do, but it's going to be fun. You know, she literally was just, and that's what she wanted.
Right.
Yeah.
This has been, Ellen, thank you so much for coming in.
I've
Seriously.
got my notes.
I know Sharon really did take notes, but I think this has been awesome for us as co-hosts. But
I've learned a lot.
I can't wait to hear feedback from our listeners because this is so much different than anything we've ever talked about. And we truly do view you as an expert in
sure.
what you have shared and just the experiences, the emotion, the everything has been incredible. I feel like we could talk about this
More.
for hours.
You're welcome back.
You know what I would love, and this is normally something we talk about off air, I guess, but I would love to have Ellen come in with one of her couples.
If they, I don't know if they do, will
Are
they talk
you
about it?
To talk about their wedding.
Possibly. I can
Yeah.
certainly ask. It would be
Okay.
something.
That would be
to consider.
amazing.
Absolutely.
Just to kind
Good
of see
idea.
their side
Right.
of it and why it was important that mom made these decisions, or why it was important
maybe
dad
even-
wanted something some way. Yeah.
Maybe even mom, and you know, because you say the moms are so involved. Whoever, but Sharon, that's a fabulous
I
idea.
think there's definitely a lot more to learn,
Mhm.
and I'm all about it.
We're all about diversity, and we want to talk about all different topics. You know, and we talk a lot about, I hate to use the word traditional, but weddings that we attend and are a part of all the time. There's so much more out there to learn. And that's what I love about this, is sharing those other experiences. So Definitely. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, thank you,
Thank you, we appreciate you
You
so
know,
much.
as always, if you want to connect with Ellen, contact information will be in the show notes. And you can always follow on social media. We really appreciate your time, your insight, your research that you did of your events.
And the years you put into learning all of this, because it's a lot.
Yes.
Thank you all. It was fun to be with you guys.
So much
It's fun
respect
to
for you.
share my experiences. I
Yeah.
wish we had pictures and I could put pictures up and show all the.
Well, and if there are some that you have permission to use where we can credit the photographer, I would love to include some of your event pictures on social media and in the show notes, if you have any. So thank you so much, Ellen. We really appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please take a few minutes to write us a,
Glowing 5-star review.
and you can always follow us on social media. What did you think about this episode? If there are topics that you want to hear, we want your feedback. Send us a message on social media, or you can always go to our website. Thank you again, Ellen. We really appreciate it.